Coming to you from BRIC House in downtown Brooklyn, this is 112BK. On the show today, what's the latest with DACA and those living in limbo? And a new book about Brooklyn, the global borough. Hi, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Ashley Ford. I'm so inspired by the young people taking to the streets. It's a political awakening, whatever the issue they end up pursuing in life. Guns, civil rights, income inequality. Now, some would like to be cynical, like the NRA, which stands to lose money and membership and power. They want their members and anyone who tunes into NRA TV to believe what they saw Saturday is a conspiracy against the Second Amendment, that Hollywood elites and billionaires have put the kids up to this, exploiting their grief. You can tell they're scared. They have reason to be. Congress actually included some gun control measures in the recent spending bill. Pretty bland ones, but still. And all the NRA can muster is their Facebook post on Saturday saying, quote, "Today's protests aren't spontaneous." Yeah, don't be fooled by those phony kids. Okay, they're right. They weren't spontaneous. They had to apply for permits, and they needed coordination and communication between the different folks that would be joining the march. They had to answer questions, kind of like questions on tests, but easier. Are there going to be stages, speakers, tents, food, porta potties? Of course they got some help with setting all this up. I'm 31 and I would need help setting all this up. But I guess we shouldn't give kids credit for having genuine emotions, inclinations, concerns, beliefs, or the capacity to organize. Don't give them that. Just give them guns. At NRA Youth Days, not sure if they're still doing them, but they did in 2014, kids the same age or younger were given free membership and an opportunity to win a high-powered rifle. You can't march, but you can definitely shoot. Well, I say shoot for the stars. All you crisis actors, proxies, and pawns, enough of us have your backs, and your aim is true. On the show today, we'll learn the latest on DACA. Congressional deadlines have passed, so what does that mean for those in limbo? Then a new book talking about the ebbs and flows of this great borough. It's called Brooklynites, and we've got the authors on hand. But first, some things. A New York State senator is proposing a state-funded research group dedicated to understanding mental health and gun violence. Roxanne Prasad from the 19th Senate District says the group is needed in order to understand the underlying issues of gun violence, what causes people to access guns, and then what causes them to use them as weapons. I would say they access them because they can, and they use them as weapons because they are weapons. But I'm not a researcher. I'll leave it up to the experts, assuming this wins passage. It's taking 6 months since Hurricane Maria to get the power restored to 90% of Puerto Rico. To make sure the power grid's not in such a precarious state for next hurricane season, some are betting on solar energy, including a Brooklyn architect, Jonathan Marvel, who spent part of his youth on the island. During the recovery, he brought solar generators and batteries to the island and set them in community centers. Now he wants to do something more long-term, like getting solar to contribute up to 10% of the island's energy needs. It won't be cheaper, but for places that absolutely can't afford to have the power go off, like hospitals or wastewater treatment facilities, it should be more reliable. Brooklyn shrank last year. No, it wasn't another Rick Moranis movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Borough, or the rising sea level, well, sort of. It was population. According to the latest census numbers, Brooklyn lost about 2,000 people in 2017. Could it be that we really are experiencing a creativity or brain drain as artists and activists decamp for Philly or LA in search of cheaper rents? Could be that, coupled with the improved economy, which means there are also jobs in these places with cheaper rents. Gentrification, you're bringing me down. Well, my numbers at least. We'll talk about some of these forces later in the show. Stay tuned for our first chat. When the Trump administration ended President Obama's executive order, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, 800,000 lives were plunged into uncertainty. The current president set a deadline of March 5th for Congress to come up with some kind of legislative solution, and then he stood in the way of any agreement. So the deadline passed, and if it wasn't for 2 court orders keeping DACA in place for now, those 800,000 would be subject to deportation. And then a budget was just approved, again, with no DACA provisions. So what's up? To help us understand the latest developments, we have back on the show immigration rights activist and lawyer Cesar Vargas. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Cesar, you were supposed to be on, I think, like a couple weeks ago. It got canceled. Something came up. You had to, get back to work really quickly. Can you talk to us a little bit about what happened there?
Well, there's obviously right now within this climate, especially on this Trump administration being aggressive on detaining and arresting undocumented immigrants.
Right.
You know, he's saying that this administration is going to focus on the bad hombres. That he's going to focus on people with violent criminal records, when in fact that's not the case. We're seeing where most recently we had CUNY students who had been detained. We had people who didn't commit any type of violent criminal record who were picked up, and now the campuses are trying to find out how they can help, as well as to ensure they have legal counsel to really face this type of charges on that.
And there was a veteran very recently also who you were trying to help shield from deportation. Is that correct?
Yeah, so just this weekend, unfortunately, a veteran who served 2 tours in Afghanistan was detained and deported. He was diagnosed with PTSD. He had a criminal record with drugs. Like many veterans have a situation, especially when they come back from war and have to confront and reinstate into society. You know, this veteran was, didn't commit any type of violent offense, didn't had a violent criminal past. This was a veteran who simply needed issues. And this administration saying that we love veterans, we love our military, and we're going to help them. But this is now a nation that's supporting its own veterans.
Yes. So talk to me a little bit about all this, because we keep talking about what's happening right now under the Trump administration. I have to think that some people who are tuning in, whether by watching or listening, need to be brought up a little bit to what exactly is happening. What, especially with ICE, why do they feel so, I guess, empowered now to go after people who are veterans, people who are students, people who are doing exactly what we say every day Americans should be doing?
Right. So, it really starts with the Obama administration's priorities on immigration when he was in office. He set in place that we are going to go after the worst of the worst. We're going to go after people with violent criminal records. We're going to set priorities. We're going to go after terrorists. We're going to go after people with violent criminal records, people who have recent border crossers. But everyone else, if they are doing everything, as you said, in their country, living the American dream, we're not going to pursue them until we pass some type of immigration reform.
Right.
Under this administration, we're seeing that not only is he going after people with violent criminal records, but they literally unshackle immigration customs enforcement. The new priorities are clearly said that we are going to go after people with violent criminal records, but we're not going to exempt anyone. If you are there, if a parent's there, if a grandmother's there, if a student's there, we're going to detain, arrest, and if that person is found deportable, that person is going to be deported. So we are definitely seeing a climate where anyone is up for grabs. Anyone can be detained on this administration. And just the fact, just in terms of raw numbers, we're seeing a 171% increase of people with no criminal records being detained and deported.
Wow.
So we are seeing this.
Is that nationwide?
Nationwide,
Wow.
On the Trump's administration's first year in office, we saw an explosion of people being arrested and going through immigration proceedings and their due process. But again, with this administration, with Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who is pretty much taking away that discretion away from immigration judges to grant some type of relief for immigrants, obviously we're going to see an increase of deportations, including with different policies coming in ahead.
So a lot to keep our eyes on.
Absolutely.
Specifically with DACA, what is the law of the land right now as it pertains to these 800,000 folks?
Yeah, so after the president announced DACA would be terminated on September 5th of last year, he gave Congress 6 months until March 5th to actually come up with a legislative solution to create a path to citizenship for Dreamers. Obviously, the date came and went with no solution, and many young people are in limbo. Fortunately, the federal courts did step in and said, Mr. President, you did not go through the right process to terminate this program. You have the power, but no president has the constitutional authority to discriminate or to use any type of racial animus to target a group. And how this administration has said that, hey, Mexicans are rapists, Mexicans are criminals, immigrants from Africa and Caribbean are come from shithole countries, that person does not have the authority. And the federals did step in and allowed DACA to continue indefinitely until we have, obviously, a solution through the courts. But again, that's not a path to citizenship. Young people can still get picked up, and under this administration, even if you have everything done right, this person could be detained and deported to a country they haven't seen for 20, 30 years.
It's no way to leave, even if they have DACA.
Absolutely.
That can happen. That is no way to live. Last month, in an article for HuffPost, you wrote, "The Fourth Amendment will and must continue to be a check on the government's unlawful intrusion on our liberty." Can you elaborate on that a little bit and how it specifically pertains to DACA and to these immigration reform issues that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most important things of this country has been that I think we all hold very dearly as Americans or as people who come here is that the Constitution protects basic liberties. And the Constitution also protects immigrants as well. It protects people who are just living here and doing right.
Now, there are a lot of people who are going to say, well, doesn't that just pertain to American citizens? Aren't those my rights because I was born here or because I went about it the right way? Like, what do you say to that?
Well, the Constitution says the right of all people to be free from unreasonable search and seizure and to be protected from that. So, the obviously citizenship has certain privileges and they should be like voting, like many other issues. But the Constitution and the framers found that, no, we need to protect everyone here because if we start taking protections away from one group, there's no question that we're going to start taking protection from other groups. And what we're seeing is the Customs Border Patrol, the agency responsible for protecting our borders, are pretty much interfering in people's rights at the border. They're going into private property, installing cameras. They're asking U.S. citizens their immigration status even when they're away from the border. And again, we have seen where U.S. citizens have been detained and picked up as well because they didn't have their identification. So, this is not just about immigrants. This is not just about a person who just came here and most recent. This is really about all our rights. So, to what extent are we going to tolerate? Are we going to take away the rights from these people? But who's next? Anyone could be next.
Anybody could be next. That's something that you hear about human rights violations around the world. It's a very popular quote. First they came for those who first did, then they went for that, but eventually they came for me. That's how these things work. A few weeks back, Jeff Sessions filed a lawsuit against the state of California over sanctuary city laws. Can you tell me a little bit about what a sanctuary city means? Because there's a lot of different commentary on that people say. And also, what happened in California with Jeff Sessions and this lawsuit? Like, what could that possibly mean for sanctuary cities across the country? Yeah.
Well, legally, it's really one of those epic battles between the state and the federal government when they're clashing on rights. Sanctuary city, there's many definitions of a sanctuary city, but what the general understanding is that a sanctuary city is those jurisdictions that do not cooperate with federal immigration agents to detain or to share information with local authorities like ICE, like the NYPD. They're not going to connect. Obviously, New York City has been welcoming when it comes to sanctuary city by providing legal services for immigrants, by providing translation services. So something that New York City has but it doesn't. But what we're seeing now is, the most important is that when the federal government tries to attack California by saying California better watch out, we're going to go hard on them. This is pretty much saying that the cities like Sacramento, where the mayor pretty much announced that they were going to protect immigrants, what the federal government, in general, Jeff Sessions, cannot understand is that, yes, the federal government does have authority over immigration, but states and cities have expansive power to protect their own residents, regardless of immigration status. And this is exactly what's happening here. Sanctuary cities are not preventing immigration customs enforcement agents from operating. They're still here. Immigration agents are still making arrests in New York City, in Sacramento, in San Francisco, you name it. But what they're saying is that you cannot come in and compel our officers like the NYPD to do your job. One, that's unconstitutional. But also, if you mesh those two agencies, it's less safe for all of us because immigrants are going to be reluctant to report crimes, making our streets even unsafe for all of us. And I think that's what sanctuaries are trying to do, and that's what Attorney General Jeff Sessions just has an immigration agenda. He has been one of the most anti-immigrant legislators in Congress before he was Attorney General, and he's bringing that policies into the
which
federal
we
government.
expected.
Absolutely.
Cesar, we only have about a minute left. In that minute, can you very quickly tell me what's next? What should we be keeping our eyes on, especially as it pertains to DACA? Well,
on DACA, unfortunately, we didn't have a solution. The federal budget came with no DACA solution, only $1.6 billion for the wall. But we're seeing that elections matter. 2018 are going to be very critical, but also we need to make sure that we're seeing the upcoming deadlines like Liberian community, immigrant community is losing their temporary protection status on March 31st. That could really mean that a whole group of people are going to be subject to arrest and possible deportation. And this is some things that we're also looking out for. And ultimately, the federal government is not doing its job. It's what we in New York City can do. Governor Cuomo has the power to issue driver's license to all its residents, regardless of immigration status. That's something that could protect people. That's something that could allow people to go to work, pick up the children, and actually live safely here. So those are the things that so many things can happen. But ultimately, the fight between the Trump administration's aggressive deportation machine is still going on, and the community is still resisting that.
Fantastic. Well, not the first part, but the second part. Definitely fantastic. Cesar, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Appreciate it.
I'ma shine bright. I'ma shine bright.
I spoke to a coworker who recently went to Paris. He met some Parisians, told them he lived in Brooklyn, and they were like, "No way, that's so cool." He described it as envy from people living in Paris. Surprising? Well, Brooklyn is a global brand, and so much is happening here with food, culture, politics, that yeah, it's a happening place. But are we blowing up too big and in danger of risking all that we've become and ending up a Madame Tussauds tribute to a once hip DIY city? And what about the side of Brooklyn that most people encounter that's nothing like the coffee table book ideal? Looking at some of these issues, how we got here, where we are, and where we're going, in a new, not coffee table book, are two professors from City Tech and co-authors of Brooklyn Tides, The Fall and Rise of a Global Borough. We welcome Ben Shepard. Thanks for joining us on 112BK. And Mark Noonan. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you.
So can we just start with a conversation with Ben? We just had a headline before we even started talking to you guys in the show about the fact that people have left Brooklyn. Brooklyn's numbers got lower. Is this a trend? We also alluded to the fact that, it might be because of gentrification. Does that hold any water?
I mean, homelessness in New York City, it's not rocket science. If people can't afford a place to live, they end up homeless. Our students don't live near the college. Our students live deep in the Bronx, and they take trains across Queens to get to downtown Brooklyn. It's not affordable.
Right. So what do we do about that? Mark, do you have any idea about, is there something that we do about that, about the fact that, we're losing people? Should we be worried about it?
Of course we should be worried about it. We're all feeling the effects, and at the heart of our book is this argument that people are being pushed out, and there are a lot of steps that we can take. There actually is a quote. We have a quote from Spike Lee that actually talks about people being pushed further and further and further, almost into the Atlantic Ocean. And how are we going to stand up against this tide of development, the glossy buildings? And I think that both myself and especially Ben, power to the people. This is our borough. These global forces seem larger, invisible, but it is up to us. Affordable housing, mixed-use development. It's up to the people.
Talk to me about, you're talking about these global forces, right? And in this book, you guys cover a lot. You cover the Lenape, you cover the Dutch, you cover George Washington. All of this is happening in the book. And it brings us to today. That's a lot of ground to cover.
The sea of identical details.
Yes.
That's the one we're worrying about. If Brooklyn thrives with diversity. That's with the mix of stories and people. And how did we get here? And we have the opportunity to have all the ingredients of sustainable urbanism here. We have great, beautiful community gardens. We have an awesome transportation system that could be better, but we still have a system of bike lanes and public transportation and diversity and an engaged populace that really cares. So there's something really special here, and I think let's let it take care of itself. I mean, but I think the developers are getting in the way and pushing people out, and groups like Equality Flatbush are doing excellent work of trying to say we got to preserve it before it's gone because it's beautiful. The murals of Brooklyn are it's a city that it's a work of art, but it could disappear, and we could get lost in it with another Starbucks and with another glossy building. And
so what is it, and Mark, I'd love if you could answer this question, especially like with a group like, Flatbush Equality. What is it exactly that they're doing that's potentially helping us avoid some of these, harder truths that we're going to have to face soon if we don't start doing something here?
At the core, of urban living is can you afford to live here? Protecting, mostly renters' rights, and providing, affordable housing and making sure that it is affordable. Also, Brooklyn has the largest number of people living in public housing. And the conditions need to be improved, and oftentimes the public housing is kitty corner to brownstone buildings, and not only do people from various groups and various classes need to coexist, but there needs to be protections in place, and there needs to be a genuine interest from the politicians and the people that vote to see that it's important enough to retain this diversity and across classes, and it really is a large issue because Brooklyn historically was a place of work. Right, and we Brooklyn historically are the workers, but now the question is, where are they going to live?
And the elders. Let's make sure the elders have a place to live. The young people, the elders, the college students. I mean, that's what's going to make this continue to be a vibrant place. But if it's only one group that can afford it, the 1%ers, it's going to be a little boring. And the art won't be here.
Ben, it's so clear to me, and from both of you, but from the minute you sat down, it was very clear to me that both of you are super passionate about the subject matter, and that this book is something that has a lot of your passion for the research and for, to be perfectly honest, the future of Brooklyn in it. Which makes me wonder, how did you guys even get to a place where you went, we're going to
selflessly dedicated ourselves to evenings at Barbez and Brooklyn Inn, researching the discussions of the day with a few pints. Look, Brooklyn's a place of lots of stories, and if you can tap into them, it's really wonderful.
I also would add that we come from different angles. We share a lot of the same feelings as Brooklynites, and as scholars. I come from an angle of I moved here as a transplant, and like so many who were drawn here, we're drawn by the diversity, but also the beauty of the water and the industrial landscape. So my perspective was one of a cultural historian, and thinking about that other thing that draws so many creative types or progressive types, intellectuals. That too has been historically so important to Brooklyn, and we see it even in the cover. The not just the the industrial past, but also there's the motto from the Black Lives movement, and there's the globalization and Hokusai's Great Wave. We're all drawn here for a place of otherness, a place of authenticity, a place of creativity, as well as diversity and a lived neighborhood.
But if someone asked you right now, and I'd love your answer to this, Ben, if someone asked you, what is this book about? And you had to tell them in a sentence, what would you say?
I would say there's an argument that globalization, the forces of globalization are beyond our reach, out of our control. What we're saying is, there's a long history of, from Lenape forward, people resisting and people creating something beautiful in their resistance. I mean, the Underground Railroad, within feet of here, where we're sitting here doing the interview, there have been people out here saying, there's another story here. Go west. there's another story. We can find that story. And I moved here in 2000 after my favorite community garden got bulldozed in the Lower East Side. And I moved to Carroll Gardens, and I loved it. But then there was the 2004 rezoning of Williamsburg, and it was like gentrification on steroids.
Right.
And I loved the resistance, the Williamsburg warriors, the old folks, the folks from Coney Island, people getting out and saying there's something beautiful in Brooklyn, let's not just zone it all away.
Right.
And so it's also something really beautiful. And I think we've won a lot. We've created zoning restrictions in Carroll Gardens. We've beaten back big box stores. There's no Walmart here. We organized to keep no Walmart out. And the old businesses in Coney Island, they're there because people love them.
Right.
I mean, except for Shoot the Freak, which I missed.
Yeah.
It's gone. A lot of those businesses, they're there because the organizers love them.
Mark, let me ask you this really quickly before we run out of time here. I wanted to ask, do you think it's too late for Brooklyn?
We know one of these things, we're actually coming from slightly different perspectives. I think that in the title, we purposely, called it the fall and rise of global borough.
Right.
And there's pessimism. There's the history of failure of Brooklyn being decimated, and So I, actually working with Ben and thinking about these matters, I have been, that optimism, has returned.
Right.
The excitement of writing this book, I think that little steps together, and I think that it's possible, but the forces of globalization are quite mighty, and the 1%, seem to be they're tough. They're tough. Formidable adversary.
So I feel like then it's going to be really important for people to check out the launch event for the book. Can you tell me really quickly about the launch event?
Well, we're going to continue the conversation at Interference Archive on 7th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue in Brooklyn tomorrow, and we have, for the launch event...
Can you tell me the date really quickly?
It's March 27th at 7 p.m. at Interference Archive on 7th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. We wanted to bring in some artists and activists who've been involved with Black Lives Matters, the Church of Stop Shopping, Transportation Alternatives, to talk about these ongoing struggles. It's these dialectical forces that are pouring through Brooklyn. I mean, it's never over.
Right.
I mean, even if you lose a game, you always have to retie your shoes up because there's going to be another game tomorrow. Like, it's never over.
There's always a fight to be had. There's always something to speak up.
I talked with some guys in the garden in Bushwick Community Farm yesterday and yesterday in Bed-Stuy, and we had a nice warm bonfire in the garden, and we were having a great day, and they may lose their space, but they're still organizing.
Right, and they're still fighting and they're still doing the
and
work.
building community.
That to me screams optimism, by the way, because I have some faith in Brooklyn. I'm with you, Ben. We're going to be able to do this, I think, together. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Oh, I love the handshake. Thanks for tuning in. On tomorrow's show, we'll talk about social media and the security of your data, an initiative to bring solar power to Brownsville, and our resident laughaholic talks up a live comedy event here at BRIC House. Hope you can join us.